Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now we begin. What would you do if the walls around you whispered secrets, if the shadows danced just beyond your vision, and if the very air you breathed felt thick with dread? These thoughts swirled in my mind as I looked out the frosted window of our mountain cabin. The snowstorm raged outside, white tendrils of wind curling like fingers against the glass. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. I was one of 6 neighbors who had sought refuge in this isolated retreat during the harsh Alaskan winter. We were all familiar faces, but tonight felt different. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that clung to us like the cold. I could sense it in the way my companions avoided eye contact, how their laughter seemed strained, echoing hollowly in the wooden walls. The flickering light from the fireplace cast long shadows, creating an illusion of movement that made me uneasy. I shifted in my seat, wrapping my arms tighter around myself. My name is Ethan, and I had always been the one to keep my fears at bay, but something about this storm felt ominous. A soft thud came from beneath the floorboards, almost like a muffled voice. I froze, straining to listen. Was it my imagination? No, it was there again, a low, almost pleading sound. The others seemed oblivious, engrossed in their conversations about weather forecasts and road conditions. I wanted to join in, to laugh and distract myself, but the noise gnawed at my insides. "Did you hear that?" I finally asked, my voice cutting through the chatter. Everyone turned to me, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. "Hear what?" Sarah, a petite woman with bright blue eyes, leaned closer. Her brow furrowed, as if she were trying to decipher my panic. "That noise, it's coming from below," I said, pointing to the floor. "Like someone is trying to get out." A heavy silence fell over the room. The fire crackled, breaking the tension momentarily. I could see the unease creeping into their faces, doubt flickering like the flames. "Ethan, it's just the wind," Mark said dismissively, but there was a tremor in his voice. He was always the rational one, yet even he seemed on edge. "Maybe you should check it out," suggested Layla, a sharp-witted woman who rarely backed down from a challenge. Her tone was light, but her eyes held a hint of fear. "It could be a raccoon or something. Just make sure it's not under your bed when you go to sleep." I chuckled nervously, but the laughter felt hollow. Right, a raccoon in a cabin in the middle of a snowstorm. That's comforting. The group slowly resumed their conversations, but I could feel their glances lingering on me. I was the odd one out, the one who had let fear seep in. The tension in the room thickened, and the noises beneath the floor grew louder, more insistent. Hours passed, the storm howling outside, each gust a reminder of our isolation. I tried to shake off my unease, pouring another cup of coffee as the others shared stories and played cards. But each laughter rang false, a mask for the growing paranoia that gnawed at my mind. Then suddenly one of our group members, Tom, stood up. He was the oldest among us, a retired firefighter with a reassuring presence. "I'm going to check the basement," he announced, and a ripple of uncertainty passed through us. "No, in this weather," Sarah protested, but Tom was already moving towards the door, his sturdy frame silhouetted against the dim light. "It'll be fine. Just a quick look," he replied, determination etched on his face. I watched as he opened the door, the wind rushing in like a living thing. He stepped into the darkened hallway, and the door closed behind him with a solid thud. Silence enveloped us, thick and suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Minutes turned into an eternity, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist in the flickering light. "Maybe we should go check on him," I suggested, my heart racing. Before anyone could respond, we heard it, a loud crash from the basement, followed by a deafening silence. The air froze, and I could see the fear reflected in everyone's eyes. "Tom," Mark called out, his voice shaky. There was no answer. We exchanged panicked glances, the room closing in around us. The noise from beneath the floor had escalated to a low, ominous murmur. It was as if the cabin itself was alive, breathing, whispering secrets we were never meant to hear. "Stay here," Leila said, her voice firm, but I could see the tremor in her hands. She walked to the door, but before she could open it, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if the danger wasn't just outside? What if it was lurking right here among us? The temperature seemed to drop, and the shadows deepened, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I could feel my pulse quickening, the walls of the cabin feeling closer, almost claustrophobic. As I turned to look at the others, I saw it, an expression of fear, a crack in the facade we had all been trying to maintain. We were not just battling the storm outside, we were facing the dark corners of our own minds. And the voices beneath the floor had only just begun to awaken. The air was charged, heavy with unspoken words and secrets that threatened to spill out. I realized we were trapped, not just by the snowstorm, but by our own fears. And as the night wore on, I knew we were about to uncover something far more sinister than we ever expected. The minutes stretched into a haunting eternity as we stood frozen, uncertainty settling heavily around us. The crackling of the fire offered little comfort, its warmth diminished by the cold dread enveloping the room. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears, a drum of anxiety thrumming steadily as I exchanged worried glances with my neighbors. "Shouldn't someone go after Tom?" Mark finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper laced with unease. It was clear we were all feeling it, the electric tension that crackled in the air. "Do you really think that's a good idea?" Leila's question hung heavily in the air, her eyes darting toward the basement door as if it were a portal to another realm. "What if something's down there?" I could almost hear the echo of Tom's footsteps as he descended the creaking stairs. The vision of him disappearing into the darkness gnawed at my mind. The thought that something could have happened to him was unbearable. "I'll go," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I didn't want to be the coward. My feet moved before I could second-guess myself, but a wave of fear gripped me as I approached the door. The howling wind outside intensified, as if warning me to turn back. "Ethan, wait," Sarah called out, her voice filled with urgency. "What if—" But I didn't let her finish. I opened the door, the cold air rushing in like a frigid tide. The hallway was shrouded in darkness, shadows clinging to the corners as I stepped cautiously inside. The wind howled outside, drowning out any sounds from below, but I strained to listen, hoping for any sign of Tom. I could feel the chill creeping up my spine, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight as I descended the stairs. Each step felt like an eternity, the dim light from the cabin fading behind me. I reached the bottom and the air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive silence. "Tom," I called out, my voice echoing in the confined space. No answer. Just the low hum of the wind outside, whispering secrets I couldn't grasp. I took a few steps forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The basement was cluttered with old furniture and boxes, dust swirling in the faint light. A flicker of movement caught my eye, but when I turned there was nothing, only the oppressive stillness. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the air felt charged, electric. Then I heard it again, the low, mournful sound from beneath the floor, almost like a distant voice calling out. It sent chills racing down my spine. I knelt down, pressing my ear against the cold, wooden floorboards. "Tom," I whispered, desperation creeping into my voice. "Are you down there?" The voice rose, almost like a whisper that rippled through the air, curling around me like a ghostly embrace. "Help me," it was faint, barely audible, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. I scrambled to my feet, the weight of dread bearing down on me. "I had to find him." The thought of leaving Tom down here alone, possibly in danger, sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. I started searching the room, pushing aside old crates and furniture, my heart racing. But as I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced back toward the staircase, the shadows stretching and shifting, playing tricks on my mind. I took a deep breath and pressed on, heart pounding as I called out again, "Tom, where are you?" Just then, the wind outside howled even louder, rattling the windows above. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned back to the room. The shadows seemed to lengthen, coiling around me, wrapping me in a cold embrace. The voices grew louder, more insistent, a cacophony of whispers drowning out my thoughts. Suddenly, I noticed a door in the far corner of the basement. It was ajar, creaking slightly as if inviting me in. My gut twisted in apprehension, but the thought of Tom urged me forward. I moved closer, each step heavy with uncertainty. As I pushed the door open, a rush of cold air swept past me, causing goosebumps to rise on my skin. Inside was a small, dark room, cluttered with debris and old, forgotten memories. And there in the corner I saw it, a silhouette hunched over, trembling. "Tom," I called out, rushing toward the figure. But as I got closer, my breath caught in my throat. It was Tom. It was a mannequin dressed in an old coat, its hollow eyes staring blankly at me. The air grew thick with unease, and I stumbled back, fear washing over me. The whispers intensified, drowning out my thoughts. I felt the panic rise in my chest, a tidal wave of dread. "Ethan," I heard a voice call from the top of the stairs. It was Sarah, her face pale and frightened. "Get back up here, please." I hesitated, torn between the need to find Tom and the overwhelming instinct to escape the suffocating darkness. But then I heard it again, the low, desperate plea from beneath the floor. "Help me." I turned, glancing back at the mannequin one last time, feeling the cold grip of fear tightening around my heart. I couldn't stay here any longer. I ran back toward the door, adrenaline propelling me forward as I rushed up the stairs, bursting into the cabin's warm light. "What happened?" Mark asked, concern etched on his face. "Did you find him?" No, I gasped, the words spilling out. I found something else. The whispers, they were calling for help. The group exchanged worried glances, the reality of our situation settling heavily in the air. We need to search for him, I urged, the panic evident in my voice. But just then, a loud bang echoed from the basement, followed by a chilling silence. The floorboards creaked, and I felt a cold breeze wash over me, as if something had stirred in the dark. Maybe it's time we all just stay together, Leela suggested, her voice shaking. What if whatever is down there is angry? I looked around, fear spreading through the group like wildfire. It was clear we were trapped, not only by the storm, but by something far more sinister lurking within the cabin's walls. And the whispers that haunted us were only just beginning to rise. Panic gripped the cabin like an iron vice. The atmosphere, once filled with the warmth of camaraderie, had shifted into something thick and suffocating. I glanced around at the faces of my neighbors, their expressions ranging from fear to disbelief. We were trapped, and the reality of our situation was closing in like the snowstorm outside. Did you hear that bang? Mark asked, his voice trembling. What if it's not just the wind? What if something is in here with us? I felt my stomach drop. The idea that whatever was down there in the basement might have moved up here with us was chilling. The shadows flickered against the walls as the fire crackled, casting eerie shapes that danced like specters in the dim light. Tom's still down there, I insisted, my voice rising with urgency. We can't just leave him. We have to look for him now. Lila shook her head. What if it's dangerous? We don't even know what's causing those noises. It could be something unnatural. Her eyes darted to the basement door, which now seemed to loom larger, more menacing. I don't care, I shot back, desperation clawing at my chest. He needs our help. We can't let fear dictate our actions. We owe it to him. The group fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. They exchanged hesitant glances, their uncertainty palpable. Finally, Sarah stepped forward, her expression resolute. I'll go with you, Ethan. We'll find him together. Are you sure? I asked, my heart racing. I didn't want to put anyone else in danger, but the thought of facing whatever was down there alone was equally terrifying. I'm sure, she replied, determination etched on her face. We have to do this. Mark and Leela glanced at each other before nodding, slowly rising to their feet. All right. We'll stay close, Mark said, his voice steadier now. But we need to stick together. If something happened. I nodded, grateful for their support, even as dread pooled in my stomach. We gathered flashlights and made our way toward the basement door, the cold air swirling around us. Each step felt heavier, as if the very house were trying to hold us back. The sound of the wind outside grew louder, howling like a banshee, drowning out the lingering whispers that had been echoing in my mind. I turned the doorknob slowly, the creak of the hinges sounding like a ghostly wail. The cold draft rushed past us as we descended into the darkness once more. The faint beam of my flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air. Tom, I called out again, hoping against hope that he would respond. But there was only silence. The basement felt more alive now, filled with the weight of unseen eyes watching us from the shadows. We reached the bottom of the stairs, and I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. The room looked the same, yet somehow different, the shadows creeping closer as if they were aware of our presence. "What was that bang?" Sarah whispered, glancing nervously around the room. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we need to find that door again. The one I saw." We moved cautiously toward the far corner, my flashlight flickering over the debris and dust-covered furniture. The oppressive silence was deafening, broken only by the distant howling of the wind. Suddenly I spotted the door still ajar, a faint glimmer of darkness seeping through. My pulse quickened as I approached it, the chill of anticipation sending shivers down my spine. I reached for the handle, hesitating for just a moment. "What if it's just another trick?" Mark said, his voice tense. "What if we're not supposed to go in there?" "Tom might be there," I replied, swallowing hard. "We have to at least check." I pushed the door open wider, and an icy gust rushed out, making us shudder. The small room beyond was even darker, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. "Tom," I called out, my voice trembling as I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight illuminating a clutter of old, forgotten things. But as I turned the corner, the sight before me made my blood run cold. In the center of the room lay a makeshift cot, and on it was a tattered blanket stained with what looked like dark, dried blood. A chill ran down my spine. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices rising around us, clawing at the edges of my sanity. "Ethan," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with horror. "Look at that." I turned to where she pointed, and my breath hitched. There, pinned against the wall, was a faded photograph. It depicted a family, smiling and happy. But the woman in the center, her eyes dark and hollow, seemed to stare directly at me, her expression twisted in grief. "Who is she?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, feeling the air grow heavier with each passing moment. But a nagging sensation tickled the back of my mind, a connection I couldn't quite place. Then I heard it again, the voice, clearer now, rising above the din. "Help me, please." I felt the urge to flee, but I couldn't. The room seemed to hold me captive. "Tom," I shouted again, desperation creeping into my tone. "Are you in here?" No response. Just the relentless whispers that seemed to swirl around me, drawing me deeper into the shadows. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang, and I felt my heart drop. "What the hell?" Mark yelled, rushing to the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Let us out," Sarah shouted, panic rising in her voice. "Calm down," I urged, but my own voice trembled. The air grew colder, and the whispers morphed into frantic pleas, echoing in my mind. "Help us, help us." The shadows in the room twisted and writhed, becoming something almost tangible. I felt the icy fingers of fear clawing at my throat, choking me. "We need to get out of here." I turned back to the room, my flashlight flickering wildly. In the corner, a dark shape began to emerge, indistinct and menacing. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was not just a figment of my imagination. "Ethan," Sarah cried out, her eyes wide with terror. I stumbled back, colliding with Mark as we both scrambled toward the door, desperate to escape. But the weight of the darkness pressed in around us, the whispers rising to a deafening roar. "Help us! Help us!" In that moment, I understood we weren't just looking for Tom. We were uncovering something far more sinister, a darkness that had festered here long before we arrived. And it was hungry. As the shape lunged forward, I felt my grip on reality slipping. I turned, grabbing the doorknob with all my strength. It twisted, but the door remained firmly shut. Panic surged within me, and I could feel the cold tendrils of despair wrapping around my heart. "Ethan, do something," Mark yelled, his voice tinged with desperation. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed against the door, slamming my shoulder into it. The shadows writhed around us, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "Help us! Help us!" And then, just as the darkness seemed to engulf us completely, the door burst open, sending us tumbling into the light of the cabin. We scrambled to our feet, breathless and shaken, but the threat was still there, looming in the darkness behind us. I glanced back, heart racing. The basement door swung shut with a finality that echoed through my bones. "We need to find Tom," I said, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at me. "We can't let this darkness win." But as I looked around at my friends, I realized that we were no longer just facing the storm outside. We were in a fight for our very souls, against something ancient and hungry, lurking just beneath the surface. And we were running out of time. The cabin felt like a fragile sanctuary, yet every creak of the floorboards reminded me that safety was a fleeting illusion. My heart raced as I exchanged frantic glances with Mark, Sarah, and Layla. The storm outside roared like a wild beast, but the real danger loomed just beneath our feet. "Tom is still down there," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "We can't leave him. We have to go back." "No," Leela's voice cut through the tension, her eyes wide with fear. "What if it's waiting for us? What if it wants us all?" I could feel the weight of her words. The very air in the cabin seemed to grow colder, as if the walls were closing in on us. I took a deep breath, fighting the rising tide of panic that threatened to engulf me. "We need to stick together. If we're going to do this, we have to be united." "Unite against what?" Mark snapped, his frustration boiling over. "Something is down there and it's not human. We could be walking into a trap." I turned to him, desperation clawing at my insides. "But if we don't try, we may never know what happened to him. He could be hurt or worse." The last word hung heavily in the air. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "Ethan's right. We owe it to him. But we need a plan. We can't just rush in blindly." I nodded, grateful for her steady presence. "We'll take the flashlights, keep close together, and if anything feels off, we back away. No heroics. Just find Tom and get out." The others reluctantly agreed, and we gathered our courage, flicking on our flashlights and casting beams of light into the creeping shadows. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken fears, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in my ears as we approached the basement door once more. I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. The whispers, now a constant undercurrent in my mind, seemed to rise in a frenzy. They were louder this time, more urgent, as if they knew we were coming back. "Help us, help us." "Ethan," Leela whispered, her voice trembling. "What if we shouldn't do this?" "Too late for that now," I muttered under my breath, steeling myself. I twisted the knob and pushed the door open, the familiar cold air enveloping us like a shroud. The basement was dimly lit by our flashlights, and the unsettling shadows danced around us. I led the way down the creaky stairs, the wood groaning beneath our weight. With each step, I could feel the tension rising, a palpable energy crackling in the air. We reached the bottom, the musty scent of dampness clinging to the walls. "Tom," I called again, my voice echoing into the darkness. Silence answered, save for the faint sound of wind rattling the window frames above. "Let's check the room again," Mark suggested, glancing nervously toward the door that had trapped us earlier. The thought of going back into that dark corner sent a chill through my spine, but we had no other choice. We moved toward the room, my flashlight beam piercing through the blackness. The air felt heavy, thick with tension and anticipation. The makeshift cot remained where we had last seen it, the stained blanket lying like a sinister reminder of what had transpired. But as I stepped inside, something felt off. The shadows seemed to flicker, morphing into shapes that skittered just out of sight. "Ethan, look," Sarah's voice quivered as she pointed toward the wall. My breath hitched as I followed her gaze. The photograph was gone. In its place was a series of markings, scratches etched into the wood, forming strange, indecipherable symbols. What is this?" I whispered, stepping closer. "It looks like claw marks," Mark said, his voice low. Like something was trying to get out. The realization sank in, heavy and suffocating. "Or trying to get in," I murmured, the fear creeping back into my thoughts. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, a cacophony of voices urging us to leave, to run. "We should go back upstairs," Leela suggested, her face pale. "We can't stay down here. It's too wrong." But before I could respond, I heard it again, a low, guttural growl emanating from the darkness beyond the shadows. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my grip. The air shifted, charged with a malevolent presence. "Tom," I yelled, fear spilling out in a desperate plea. "Where are you?" No answer. Just that growl closer now, echoing off the walls. Panic surged within me, pushing me forward. I needed to find him. I had to know if he was okay. As I turned, I saw a figure in the far corner of the room, partially obscured by shadows. My heart raced as I stepped closer, flashlight beam locking onto the silhouette. "Tom," I called again, but the figure didn't move. "Ethan, wait," Sarah shouted, but I was already there, my mind racing with hope and fear. The flashlight flickered, illuminating the figure. It was a ragged mannequin, old and worn, its eyes staring blankly. I felt my stomach twist in disappointment and dread. "False alarm," I said, my voice shaky. But the moment of relief was short-lived. The growl came again, louder this time, a deep rumble that vibrated through my bones. "Ethan, we need to go," Mark shouted, his voice urgent. Just then the basement door slammed shut behind us once more, sealing us in. I rushed toward it, but it wouldn't budge. "No, not again," I yelled, pounding against the wood. "Get away from the door," Leela screamed, and I turned just in time to see the shadows coalesce into a dark mass, swirling and twisting, forming a shape that loomed ominously in the room. "What is that?" I gasped, my heart racing. The figure moved closer, its form indistinct yet menacing, tendrils of darkness reaching out like grasping hands. The whispers crescendoed, rising to a deafening roar. "Help us! Help us!" they cried, each voice a haunting echo of despair. "Run!" I shouted, and we turned, racing toward the far wall as the darkness surged forward. My mind screamed for escape, but all I could hear were those words, "Help us." In that moment, I realized we were not just trapped by the storm outside. We were ensnared in something much more sinister, an ancient evil that had long been waiting for unsuspecting souls to wander into its grasp. As we scrambled for a way out, I could feel the cold tendrils of fear wrapping around my heart, squeezing tighter with each frantic heartbeat. The last remnants of sanity slipped away as I faced the darkness closing in, knowing that we were all in peril and that Tom's fate hung in the balance of our survival. "Wython!" "The window!" Sarah shouted, her eyes wide with terror. I turned, spotting the small window at the top of the basement stairs. "We have to break it," I yelled, adrenaline surging through me. We had to escape this nightmare. With renewed determination, I sprinted for the stairs, the whispers clawing at my mind. "Help us! Help us!" But as I reached for the window, I could feel the shadows closing in, the weight of the darkness threatening to pull me under. "Ethan!" Mark cried out, his voice filled with desperation. "We have to go now." I glanced back at my friends, their faces pale and filled with fear. We were running out of time. With one final surge of strength, I threw my shoulder against the window frame, shattering the glass and feeling the shards rain down around me. "Go!" I shouted, scrambling through the broken opening as the darkness clawed at my back. I felt hands grasping at my legs, pulling me down, but I kicked free, tumbling onto the snow-covered ground outside. The cold air hit me like a slap, invigorating yet chilling. I looked back to see my friends struggling against the shadows, the tendrils reaching out for them. "Sarah! Mark! Lila!" I yelled, desperate to pull them free. They pushed through, bursting into the light of the stormy night. But even as we ran, the darkness loomed behind us, whispering promises of despair. The fight wasn't over. "Which way?" Leela gasped, her breath coming in quick bursts. "Back to the road," I urged, pointing into the swirling snow. "We need to get to safety." As we sprinted through the snow, I felt the presence behind us, the shadows retreating but never fully gone. It was still there, lurking just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting for the right moment to strike again. We could hear the storm raging, but the world felt different now, more alive, more dangerous. We had escaped the cabin, but the nightmare was far from over. And as the wind howled around us, I knew we were still in the grip of something much darker than a simple snowstorm. The real horror was yet to come. The storm raged around us like a wild beast, howling and shrieking as we stumbled into the thick blanket of snow. My heart raced and adrenaline coursed through my veins as I turned back to see the cabin receding into the distance, a silhouette swallowed by the blizzard. Each gust of wind felt like icy fingers reaching out to pull us back into the darkness we had narrowly escaped. "We need to keep moving," I shouted over the wind, glancing at Sarah, Mark, and Lila, their faces pale and eyes wide with terror. "The road is just a little further." We pressed on, the snow crunching under our feet, but I could feel the weight of something unseen pressing in on us. The air felt thicker, almost suffocating, as if the storm itself were alive and watching. Each flake that danced through the wind seemed to carry whispers, echoing the haunting cries we had heard in the basement. Ethan, do you think Tom made it out? Sarah's voice trembled, filled with a mix of fear and hope. I wanted to reassure her, to promise that he was safe, but deep down, I felt a gnawing doubt. He has to be, I said, forcing the words out. He wouldn't just leave us. But with each step, my conviction wavered. What if the darkness had taken him? What if it was something more sinister than we could comprehend? The realization clawed at my insides, twisting my stomach into knots. We pressed forward, the storm intensifying, visibility dwindling. I could barely see a few feet ahead, but I kept my flashlight trained on the path. Stay close, I urged, glancing back at my friends. The panic in their eyes mirrored my own. Suddenly Mark stumbled, falling to his knees in the snow. I can't do this, he gasped, breath coming in ragged bursts. Mark, get up, I shouted, panic rising within me. We have to keep going. But he shook his head, his face drawn and hollow. It's too much. I can't breathe. I rushed to him, kneeling beside him in the freezing snow. Look at me. We're going to make it out of here, I promise. Just a little further. Leela and Sarah huddled closer, their breaths mingling in the frigid air. Mark, please. We need you, Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking. With a trembling hand, I gripped Mark's shoulder. You're stronger than this. You've made it this far. Don't give up now. For a moment, his eyes flickered with determination, but then they dimmed again. What if it comes back for us? He whispered, fear choking his voice. The thought sent a chill down my spine. What if the shadows were following us, lurking just beyond the storm? I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see them rising from the snow, ready to drag us back into the abyss. Let's get him up, Leela said, urgency lacing her tone. We can't stop here. Together we helped Mark to his feet, wrapping our arms around him for support. The wind howled around us, but we moved forward, a fragile line of humanity against the fury of nature. As we trudged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle of the trees, every shift in the snow felt like a prelude to something dark and menacing. The air was thick with tension, suffocating and oppressive. Then, just as we began to hope we might see the road ahead, a low rumble echoed through the storm. My heart skipped a beat. It was a sound I had heard before, the guttural growl from the basement. It's here, I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the wind. The others froze, eyes wide with terror. What do we do? Leela cried, her voice rising in pitch. Keep moving, I urged, trying to push the panic down. We can't let it catch us. But the growl came again, closer this time, a chilling reminder of the darkness we had escaped. I glanced back, catching a glimpse of a shadow flickering just beyond the reach of my flashlight. Run, I yelled, and we took off, snow flying beneath our feet. The world became a blur of white and gray as we sprinted into the storm, desperation fueling our every step. The howling wind seemed to pulse with a life of its own, whipping around us, disorienting us as we fought against the elements. The cold seeped through my clothes, biting at my skin, but I couldn't focus on that. All that mattered was getting away. Suddenly Mark stumbled again, falling behind. I can't keep up, he gasped, his breath clouding in the freezing air. Mark, no, I shouted, my heart racing. You have to get up. I can't, he cried, despair coloring his voice. Leela and Sarah rushed to his side, but I could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that we might lose him. The growl echoed again, and I felt the panic rising like a tidal wave. Leave me. Just go, Mark yelled, tears streaming down his cheeks. You have to make it. No, I shouted, anger and desperation fueling my words. We're not leaving you behind. We're getting out of this together. But even as I spoke, I could feel the weight of the storm pressing down on us, the shadows creeping closer, hungry for our despair. Ethan, Sarah's voice pierced through the chaos. We have to decide. No. I looked around, the storm swirling like a living entity, closing in on us. There was no time to waste. Okay. We pull him up and keep moving. On the count of 3. We all nodded, taking positions around Mark. 1, 2, 3. With a collective effort, we heaved him up, the snow slippery beneath our feet. Go. Keep going, I shouted, adrenaline surging as we pushed forward, Mark leaning heavily on us. The growl reverberated in the air again, closer than before, and I felt a surge of dread. We had to reach the road. We had to find safety. But as we stumbled through the snow, I could feel the darkness creeping closer, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. I kept my flashlight trained on the path ahead, but the shadows danced just beyond the light, taunting us with their presence. Ethan, look, Leela gasped, pointing ahead. I squinted through the storm, heart pounding. A flicker of light broke through the blizzard, a beacon of hope. The road, I shouted, feeling a rush of relief. But then I heard it again, the growl, closer now, a menacing rumble that sent ice through my veins. It was behind us, stalking us through the storm. Run! Don't stop, I yelled, pushing us forward as fast as we could go. We sprinted toward the road, our breaths coming in desperate gasps. The growl echoed behind us, growing louder, more furious. It was as if the very storm was alive, intent on dragging us back into the darkness. Finally, we burst onto the road, the headlights of a distant vehicle illuminating the swirling snow. I felt a rush of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the terror that still loomed behind us. Get to the car, I shouted, my heart pounding as I scanned the darkness for any sign of our pursuer. The growl resonated in my ears, a primal sound that sent shivers down my spine. But we pressed on, racing toward the light. Ethan, hurry, Sarah cried, fear etched on her face as she glanced back. I reached for the door handle, heart racing, and flung it open, ushering my friends inside. Get in. No. We all scrambled into the car, slamming the doors shut. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking as I finally turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, but the growl reverberated outside, a haunting reminder of the darkness that still lingered. Go, go, Mark shouted, panic rising in his voice. I slammed the car into gear, racing down the road as the snow whipped around us. But even as we sped away, I could feel the presence behind us, a shadow that wouldn't let go. Did we lose it? Leela panted, looking back through the rear window. I don't know, I replied, my heart still racing. But we can't stop now. As we drove deeper into the storm, I realized that we had escaped the cabin, but the true fight for survival had only just begun. The darkness was still out there, waiting, watching, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it would come for us again. What we had encountered was not just a storm, but a manifestation of our deepest fears. And as long as we were together, we would have to confront it head on. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, but if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. What secrets do the pages of forgotten books hold, and what shadows dance between their lines? The old library in Missouri had always been a place of solace for me. Its tall, dusty shelves stood like ancient sentinels, guarding stories long lost to time. I had spent countless hours among the musty tomes, losing myself in their worlds. But recently, something changed. A chill ran through the air, and the atmosphere felt thick with an unsettling tension, as if the very building was holding its breath. It was a Friday night, and the library was nearly empty. Only the faint flicker of fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the rows of books. I worked the closing shift, alone except for a few scattered patrons who were engrossed in their reading. I pushed a stray strand of hair behind my ear and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. As the clock struck midnight, the last patron left, and silence enveloped me like a heavy blanket. I returned to my tasks, shelving books and organizing the checkout area. But then, just as I began to feel a sense of calm, I heard it, a soft rustling sound echoing through the aisles. My heart skipped a beat. I paused, straining to listen. It came again, a low whisper, almost like the rustle of pages turning. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself, trying to brush it off as the wind sneaking through the old windows. Yet the sound persisted, tugging at the edges of my sanity. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched, and I glanced around, half expecting to see a figure lurking in the shadows. The familiar scent of aging paper filled the air, but there was something else, something damp and metallic like blood. I shivered and took a step toward the source of the noise, my breath hitching in my throat. Each footfall felt heavy, as if the ground itself were resisting my movement. The library, once a haven, had transformed into a labyrinth of dread. I turned a corner, and there it was, the history section. The books seemed to breathe, their spines shifting slightly as if they had a life of their own. The rustling intensified, morphing into a cacophony of whispers that echoed off the walls. I held my breath, straining to discern the words, but they remained just out of reach, tantalizing and terrifying. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling slightly. No response. Just the whispers swirling around me, drowning me in their urgency. My mind raced. Was I alone, or was someone here with me? I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. The sound grew louder, more insistent, a rush of voices merging into one. It felt as if the library itself was alive, thrumming with a dark energy. I needed to leave, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, caught in the thrall of the shadows. Then from the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a flicker of something darting between the shelves. A chill crept up my spine, and I turned to face it. The sight that greeted me was both fascinating and horrifying. A book lay open on a table, its pages flipping rapidly as if an unseen hand was turning them. I approached cautiously, heart racing. What kind of force could animate the lifeless? I felt a pull toward the book, its words promising secrets and forbidden knowledge. but fear gripped me. I reached out, hesitant, my fingers brushing the edges of the pages. The moment I touched it, the whispers escalated into a frenzy, swirling around me like a tempest. I snatched my hand back, gasping. The rustling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to seep into my bones. I turned on my heel, ready to flee, but something deep within me urged me to look back. The book remained open, but now the pages had stilled, and a single word glowed faintly on the page. Help. My breath quickened, fear battling curiosity. Who or what was asking for help? I had to know. But as I took a step closer, the lights flickered violently, plunging the library into darkness for a split second. When they returned, I was no longer alone. The air crackled with tension, a heavy weight that pressed down on me. A shadow shifted in my peripheral vision, and I turned to see a figure standing at the end of the aisle. It was indistinct, a mere outline cloaked in darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. "Who are you?" I whispered, but the words felt futile. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to glide closer, moving with an unnatural grace. Panic surged within me, and I stumbled back, searching for an escape. The whispers returned, louder this time, swirling like a storm, each voice filled with fear and desperation. I dashed toward the exit, heart racing, but the door felt impossibly far away. The figure loomed closer, its form becoming clearer. It was a woman, her face pale and twisted in anguish, as if trapped between worlds. I froze, caught in the grip of terror. "Help me," she breathed, the word escaping her lips like a ghostly sigh. I had to escape, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from her haunting gaze. The library around me seemed to warp, shelves bending and shifting as if they were alive, closing in. I could feel the walls constricting, and I realized this was not just a library. It was a prison for the lost, a place where knowledge and darkness intertwined. The echoes of the past rushed through my mind as I turned to flee, but the shadows twisted around me, pulling me back into their depths. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, drowning out my thoughts, leaving only fear in their wake. I would have to confront whatever horrors lurked within these walls, for the library was awakening, and I had unknowingly stepped into its dark embrace. The sensation of cold wrapped around me like a vice as I stumbled back, my heart racing faster than I thought possible. The ghostly woman's eyes bore into mine, filled with a desperate longing that tugged at something deep within me. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice barely more than a breath, but it reverberated in the hollow spaces of the library, echoing off the walls. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of panic that clouded my mind. How could I help? I didn't even understand what was happening. The shadows danced closer, drawing in around me, and I could feel the chill deepening, gnawing at my bones. The flickering lights overhead began to wane, casting long, flickering shadows that twisted and morphed like live creatures, hungry and waiting. I glanced back at the ghost. Her translucent figure seemed to shimmer, flickering in and out of focus as if she were made of smoke. What had tethered her to this place? The library felt heavy with sorrow, every shelf lined with books that whispered secrets long buried. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity clawed at me, pulling me closer to the mystery before me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What happened to you?" She took a step forward, and I could see her more clearly now. The pale skin stretched tight over her bones, her dark hair hung limply around her face, and her clothes were remnants of another time, frayed and faded. "I was trapped," she murmured, her voice echoing with an otherworldly sadness. "I sought knowledge, but the price was too high." The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I shifted, every sound amplifying the tension. The darkness seemed to pulse, alive and watching, feeding off my fear. "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperate for answers, but terrified of what they might reveal. "I uncovered a truth that should have remained hidden," she said, her eyes widening in horror. "And now I cannot leave. The knowledge, it binds me here. You must find the book, the one that holds my secret." Before I could respond, the library groaned around us. The lights flickered again, and the whispers swelled into a furious tide, drowning out her voice. My mind raced as I fought to process what she was saying. "A book? Which book?" My instincts screamed at me to flee, but something in her gaze held me captive. Suddenly I felt a strong gust of wind, as if the air itself was alive, rushing through the aisles, sending papers flying and rattling the shelves. Books began to tremble and shift, their spines whispering secrets that clawed at the edges of my mind. The room felt unsteady, shifting like a dream caught in a nightmare. "Find it," she urged, desperation spilling into her tone. "You must find it before they come." The words sent a jolt through me, a sharp stab of urgency that eclipsed my fear. Who were they? I didn't have time to question. The library trembled as shadows slithered toward me, the darkness thickening, coiling around my ankles like a living entity. I turned and ran. My feet pounded against the wooden floor, urgency propelling me forward. I ducked through aisles, heart racing as I searched for the book she mentioned. I felt the cold tendrils of darkness reach out, brushing against my skin, urging me to stop, to surrender to the shadows. But I couldn't let that happen. The history section loomed ahead, familiar yet foreign. My eyes scanned the titles, desperation clouding my thoughts. I needed to find the right one, the one that would set her free. A book caught my eye, its spine was cracked, the title barely legible, as if it had been forgotten by time. Forbidden Knowledge, it read, the letters warped and worn. I grasped the book, and as I did, a surge of energy coursed through me. The whispers crescendoed into a chaotic chorus, echoing through my mind. The ghostly woman appeared again, hovering at the edge of my vision. "Open it," she cried, urgency spilling from her lips. With trembling hands, I cracked open the cover. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but as I began to read, the words seemed to leap from the page, swirling around me like a tempest. "Knowledge is a double-edged sword," the text warned. "To seek the truth is to invite darkness into your soul." As I read, the shadows intensified, swirling around me, thickening into a dense fog. I felt them clawing at my mind, gnawing at my resolve. I had to focus. The book contained the key to freeing the woman, but the knowledge was potent, and I could feel it trying to take root within me. I pressed on, my voice rising above the whispers. Who was she? What truth had she uncovered? I continued to read, each line more haunting than the last. With every word I felt the weight of history pressing down, the sacrifices made for knowledge, the souls bound to this place. The ghostly woman appeared beside me, her form flickering. "It was forbidden," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I could control it." But the more I learned, the more it consumed me. It wanted a vessel, and I became one. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the room plunged into darkness once more. I could hear the whispers rise to a fever pitch, drowning out my thoughts, threatening to overwhelm me. Panic surged, and I closed the book, clutching it tightly as if it were a lifeline. "Find the truth," the ghost urged, her voice strained. "You must finish what I started. Only then can I be free." Before I could respond, the lights flashed back on, illuminating the library in stark clarity. The shadows had receded slightly, but I could feel their presence, lurking just out of sight. I stood at the crossroads of knowledge and fear, a choice before me. Would I delve deeper into the dark secrets of the library, or would I flee from the knowledge that threatened to consume me? The ghost's eyes met mine, filled with urgency and dread. The library awaited my decision, and I knew that the darkness would not let me go so easily. The quest for truth had begun, and I was already ensnared in its web. The aftermath of the ritual left me breathless, the remnants of the energy still crackling in the air like static. I stood in the center of the library, the quiet enveloping me like a soft blanket, yet the echoes of what had just transpired echoed in my mind. The candle's flickering flame cast long shadows against the rows of books, which seemed to shift and sway in a ghostly dance. As I caught my breath, I felt an overwhelming mix of relief and apprehension. The atmosphere was palpably different. The oppressive weight that had clung to the library was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt both serene and unsettling. Had I truly freed the lost souls, or had I merely opened the door to something far more dangerous? I turned my attention back to the mirror, now devoid of the haunting reflections. The glass had settled into a calm surface, a portal into the unknown. The faint glow emanating from the book caught my eye, its pages now radiant with an ethereal light, almost inviting me to delve deeper. With cautious steps, I approached the table. The library's essence pulsed around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still alive, that its stories were woven into the very fabric of the space. As I reached for the book, I noticed a new inscription had appeared on one of the pages, shimmering like a freshly penned note. "Knowledge is a double-edged sword. Choose wisely, for every truth has a cost." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I could almost hear the ghost's voice echoing in my thoughts, reminding me that my actions had consequences. What other secrets had I unlocked? What might lie waiting for me if I continued to seek knowledge? Ignoring the warnings in my mind, I flipped through the pages. Each word seemed to come alive, swirling with energy, whispering of ancient spells and hidden truths. But as I read on, a familiar sound emerged from the depths of the library, the soft patter of footsteps. My heart raced. I turned sharply, scanning the shadows that cloaked the far corners of the room. "Hello," I called, my voice steadier than I felt. The footsteps ceased, and the silence that followed felt like a challenge. Hadn't I just freed the trapped souls? Shouldn't I be alone? I took a deep breath, forcing my feet to move toward the source of the sound. The shadows shifted, deepening as I approached, the shelves looming like sentinels, guarding their secrets. The air felt heavy, charged with an electricity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. "Is someone there?" I pressed, my voice trembling slightly. A chill swept through the room, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me. For a moment, I wondered if the darkness had returned, if the library was once again stirring with restless spirits. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I turned to catch a glimpse of a figure slipping between the shelves, cloaked in shadow. It was quick, barely more than a blur, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. "Wait," I shouted, pushing past the rising tide of fear that threatened to engulf me. "Who are you?" But the figure vanished, leaving behind a stillness that was almost mocking. I was alone again, yet I could feel the pulse of the library thrumming beneath my feet, as if it was urging me to chase after the unknown. The warmth of the candle flickered in response, casting playful shadows that danced along the walls. Gripping the book tightly, I moved cautiously, letting the flickering light guide my way. Each step felt like a leap into the abyss, but the promise of uncovering the truth pulled me forward. I reached the aisle where I had seen the figure, peering into the dimly lit gaps between the bookshelves. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice firmer now, fueled by a determination to face whatever had eluded me. Silence answered, but the sense of something lurking nearby lingered like a bad dream. Just then I heard it again, a faint whisper, a sound barely above a breath. "Help me." The voice was soft and plating, sending a thrill of fear coursing through me. It was a voice I did not recognize, yet it resonated deep within my soul. I followed the sound, heart pounding in my chest as I navigated the maze of bookshelves. "Where are you?" I called, urgency creeping into my tone. "I want to help." As I turned a corner, I was met with an unexpected sight. A small, round table sat in a secluded nook, cloaked in shadows, adorned with an array of dusty candles and fragile trinkets. Atop the table lay an ancient book, its leather cover cracked and worn, the spine barely holding together. I stepped closer, the flickering candlelight illuminating the cover. It was similar to the one I had found earlier, but this one seemed different, more foreboding, almost ominous. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me as I reached out to touch it. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the library, extinguishing my candle. Darkness enveloped me, swallowing the light in an instant. Panic surged as I fumbled in the pitch black, straining to hear the whispers, to feel the presence that had drawn me here. "Help me," the voice persisted, more insistent now. I forced myself to remain calm, focusing on the sound. I took a tentative step forward, my hand outstretched, feeling my way through the suffocating darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and something else, something rancid and decayed. Just as I was about to lose hope, a glimmer caught my eye. A faint light flickered in the distance, and I instinctively moved toward it, the whispers growing more fervent, wrapping around me like a shroud. I rounded another corner, and the light blossomed into a brilliant flame, illuminating a figure standing in the center of the table. My breath caught in my throat. The figure was cloaked in shadows, its features obscured, but the presence was undeniable. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The figure turned slowly, and as the light flickered, I saw the glint of eyes watching me. They were deep and hollow, filled with a sorrow that mirrored the anguish I had encountered before. "I am one of the lost," it said, its voice a haunting echo. "Trapped in the web of stories that bind this place. You have the power to help us." The realization washed over me like ice water. This was another lost soul, perhaps one who had succumbed to the darkness of the library, unable to find peace. But I had faced the darkness before, and I had the knowledge to confront it again. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice steadied by resolve. "Unlock the book," it urged, pointing to the ancient tome. "Within its pages lies the key to our freedom. But beware, the truth it reveals may shatter your understanding of this place." I felt a mixture of fear and determination swell within me. The library had already shown me its secrets, and I was no stranger to the cost of knowledge. As I reached for the book, the whispers intensified, drowning out my thoughts and wrapping around me like a living entity. With trembling hands, I opened the tome. The pages were blank, but as I began to read the incantation aloud, words materialized, swirling in dark ink before my eyes. "By the ink of truth, by the blood of the lost, I summon the knowledge hidden from sight." As I spoke, a shadow lunged from the depths of the library, swirling like a storm. The room trembled as the figure before me dissolved into the air, leaving me alone with the chaos. The shadows rose and surged, swirling around me, eager to reclaim their hold. I gripped the book tighter, my voice rising above the cacophony. "Let the lost be found. Let the shadows be banished." The power surged through me, amplifying with every word. The shadows screamed in protest, but I held my ground, determined to face the darkness that threatened to consume me. The library shook, the walls vibrating as I channeled the energy, the knowledge swirling within the pages coming alive. I felt a surge of strength, the light expanding until it enveloped me in a cocoon of warmth. And in that moment, I knew that I would either shatter the darkness or be consumed by it. The battle for the library had just begun. The air crackled with energy, an invisible force pressing against my chest as I stood amidst the chaos. Shadows twisted and writhed, their dark tendrils reaching out as if they sought to grasp me, to pull me into their inky abyss. My heart thundered in my ears, the sound drowning out the whispers that had filled the library just moments ago. "By the ink of truth, by the blood of the lost," I repeated, my voice steady despite the terror swirling around me. Each word felt like a lifeline, an anchor holding me firm against the encroaching darkness. The book in my hands pulsed with power, the ink shimmering with a life of its own. As I spoke the incantation, the shadows recoiled, hissing and spitting like angry serpents. They twisted and formed shapes, grotesque and nightmarish. I glimpsed eyes, thousands of hollow eyes, watching from the depths, filled with longing, desperation, and fury. The air grew cold, and I felt the icy fingers of fear creeping up my spine. "Let the lost be found," I shouted again, feeling the surge of energy wash over me. "Let the shadows be banished." The library trembled as the power within me swelled. The floorboards beneath my feet vibrated with intensity, and the shelves rattled as if the books themselves were alive. I closed my eyes for a moment, concentrating on the light I felt building inside, igniting a warmth that coursed through my veins. This was a fight for survival, not just for me, but for the souls trapped within these walls. Suddenly, the room erupted into chaos. The shadows howled in fury, swirling around me like a storm. They clashed with the light emanating from the book, creating a cacophony of sound that echoed off the high ceilings. It was as if the very essence of the library was battling itself, torn between the desire for freedom and the suffocating grip of despair. I focused on the glowing words, willing them to take form and function. By the knowledge hidden, I summoned the truth, I cried out, feeling the rush of magic course through me. The shadows shrieked louder, their shapes warping as they pushed against the light, desperate to reclaim their hold. In that moment, the air shimmered, and a figure began to coalesce before me, a spectral apparition formed from the very shadows that sought to engulf me. It was a woman, her face gaunt and pale, with eyes that burned with an unquenchable hunger. Her mouth opened, but instead of words, a torrent of whispers spilled forth, a cacophony of despair and longing. "Release us, free us," the voices cried, layered over one another, creating a dissonant symphony of sorrow. The shadows around her pulsed, feeding on her pain, growing stronger as she reached out toward me, her hand trembling with desperation. "Stay back," I shouted, instinctively stepping back, but the light from the book surged forward, forcing the shadows to retreat. I could feel their anger, a palpable force pushing against my will. "Please," the woman's voice cut through the chaos, her eyes locking onto mine. "You don't understand. We are bound to this place. We need you to finish what you started." "Finish what?" I demanded, my voice rising over the tumult. "What do you want from me?" "The truth lies within," she whispered, gesturing toward the book. "The knowledge that binds us can also free us. But beware, the cost is high." In that instant, a flicker of doubt crept into my mind. What truth could possibly be worth such a steep price? The library had already revealed horrors that shook me to my core. Was I truly prepared to uncover more? "Do it," the woman's voice rose in urgency, echoing with a strength that belied her spectral form. "You have the power. Do not let the shadows claim you." With renewed determination, I grasped the book tighter, its warmth a stark contrast to the icy fear that clung to the edges of my consciousness. I took a deep breath, feeling the pull of the library, the weight of its history, the cries of the lost souls. By the ink of truth, by the blood of the lost, I summon the knowledge hidden from sight, I recited, my voice resonating with conviction. "Let the light banish the darkness." As I finished the incantation, a brilliant beam of light erupted from the book, washing over the library. The shadows writhed and twisted, their forms dissolving under the intensity of the radiance. The spectral woman's figure shimmered, her eyes widening as the light enveloped her, pulling her from the grasp of despair. "Thank you," she cried, her voice a melody of relief as she began to dissolve into the light. "We are free." But as she vanished, the shadows convulsed violently, a final desperate gasp. They surged toward me, fueled by fury and fear, coalescing into a massive, grotesque form that towered above me. It was a creature woven from darkness, its face a swirl of rage, its eyes filled with an ancient malevolence. "Fool," it roared, the sound echoing through the library like a thunderclap. "You think you can banish us? We are the guardians of this knowledge. We will not be extinguished." The air grew thick with the weight of its presence, the light flickering as if it were a candle in a storm. I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, and panic threatened to engulf me. But amidst the terror, a single thought surged forward. This was my moment, my choice. I raised the book high, summoning every ounce of courage I possessed. "You may be strong," I shouted defiantly, "but I will not let you win." With a mighty cry, I opened the book again, the words on the pages glowing brighter than ever before. "By the light of truth, I command you to reveal your secrets," I yelled, my voice echoing against the walls. As I spoke, the library began to vibrate, the very foundation shaking with the force of my conviction. The shadows shrieked, the creature recoiling as the light intensified, pushing against its form. It thrashed violently, the darkness swirling around it like a tempest. The power surged through me, a tidal wave of energy that propelled me forward. I felt it coalesce in my chest, an incandescent fire that could not be extinguished. You do not own this knowledge. I will claim it for those who seek the light. The words roared from my lips, and in that moment I felt the weight of every soul lost in this library, every voice echoing through the ages, lending me strength. The shadows howled in agony, and I could feel their grip weakening. The light enveloped the creature, breaking through the darkness, illuminating the library in a brilliant blaze. The shelves vibrated, the books quivering with life as the shadows twisted and writhed, shrieking their final protests. And then, with a blinding flash, the creature exploded into 1,000 tiny particles, the darkness dissipating into nothingness. Silence fell heavy and profound, wrapping around me like a shroud. The library stood still, the air clear and crisp, the oppressive weight lifted. I was alone, but not entirely. I could still feel the echoes of the souls I had freed, their whispers lingering like a gentle breeze. Gasping for breath, I looked around the library, the once terrifying shadows now transformed into gentle flickers of light that danced across the walls. The atmosphere was different now, peaceful, serene, a sanctuary of knowledge waiting to be explored. I had won. The darkness had been vanquished, but at what cost? The price of truth had demanded its toll, and I was left to ponder the depths of what I had uncovered. As I closed the book, its warmth radiated through my fingers, a reminder of the knowledge it held. I was now its keeper, and with that came a weighty responsibility. I would protect this place, ensuring that the light shone bright against the encroaching darkness. With one last glance at the shelves, I felt the faintest shimmer of hope. The library was alive, a testament to the power of knowledge, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.